Jessica with owner of Joyfully, and today I want to talk about a series that I was thinking about sharing when we concepted Raise the Three, and that's a whole series of Don't Be Afraid of blank. And I think when I started the company, I had a lot of fears. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I was kind of going into everything really doe-eyed. And here's the secret: nobody really knows what they're doing when they go into entrepreneurship. I mean, some of the biggest businesses now, the people who started them, didn't know what they were doing when they started. It's similar to how sometimes I feel like I still don't know what I'm doing. But today I wanted to talk about the concept of not being afraid of failure. And I think in the beginning that was something that I was really afraid of, was, what if something I initiated in the business just totally fell on its face? What then? But over the years of running the company, my perspective of failure has changed. And I thought, gosh, if I could speak to somebody who was in the place I was in, because I thought about quitting so much in the beginning, what would have been an encouragement to me? And what would have helped change my perspective on failure? And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, because here's the truth. Failure, it's a business inevitability. It will happen. Something at some point will not go how you planned, and it will be a mess, and it will be scary, but it's also part of business. And I think that what happens next is really the determining factor in what's taken business to an entirely different level. And I'm speaking outside of myself for sure. Like if you've read Steve Jobs' autobiography, he founded the company, and then there was a point where he was overdeveloping products, and the board actually asked him to leave his own company. I mean, I could think of nothing more painful than that. What a public failure. And yet he came back and created the iPhone and this wildly successful company. And just think how different today would be if we didn't have the iPhone, and how it's changed so much about the world. So, but that was after he had Steve Jobs had a really massive failure. Another example is fashion icon Chanel. Her first store filed bankruptcy in the late 30s. The whole world was at war, and she didn't have revenue and had to close shop. Another example of a successful entrepreneur who failed is Richard Branson. I don't know if you've heard of Virgin Cars or Virgin Coca-Cola or Virgin Bridal, but Richard Branson has created almost as many failed businesses as successful ones, but the ones that are successful have gone on to be outrageously successful. Or even if you've heard some of the stories of successful musicians and how many times their car was repossessed when they were in the process of trying to break into a contract. I think failure is just a part of trying something, and sometimes you have success and sometimes you don't, but I think it's what you do in those moments, what you learn and how you evolve and how you overcome, which makes the difference. I think that successful people had lots of failures. They just didn't let those failures deter them from their purpose. So I have some examples of my own failures. One was, I think it was 2014, and I've mentioned this briefly before, but sometime I'll tell the story in its entirety. But there was a point when I was on an airplane, and Joyfully had been in business for a few years, and we had probably about 500 pallets of inventory. So I don't know how many units that would have been, maybe 50 to 70,000 units of custom Joyfully goods, and none of them were accessible to me. They were in our warehouse, but I could not ship them and I could not get to them. And I was on a plane and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. I have a team of people that I employ. I have no product to sustain them. If you went to joyfully.com and you clicked into, it stayed up, but when you clicked into the listing and tried to put something into your cart, it actually said something like, check back to see when this inventory is replenished. Every item on the site said that. And so I was on a plane and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the end. And I was like, no, this is not going to be the end. I'm going to find a way to make it work. This is not going to be the last chapter of Joyfully. And so, I kind of thought about it and steeled my resolve, and I wrote all these plans. And by the time the plane landed, I had a solution how I would sustain the business with no inventory, how I could get the inventory back, how I could get more inventory quickly. And something happened in my mindset, something that I realized, and it changed my perspective on failure. One other instance, just this past Black Friday, if you shopped with us, you may know that we had 2 very large, very important shipments that were lost. One, we got back 3 or 4 weeks later than expected, and one of them, it was a FedEx shipment, and we never got it, and it's lost. We still don't know what happened to it, and that shipment impacted over 1,000 customers, and people were mad, and understandably so. And it's hard. Failures are hard. I mean, if you own a company, you need to own them. Even if it was external circumstances that created what happened, you still have to take responsibility, but then you have to learn from it and say, okay, how can I be a better leader, make smarter decisions? How can I anticipate problems? Like for us, we no longer sell anything on pre-order. So what happened with those lost shipments would never, ever, ever happen again. I didn't think FedEx could lose something so large, but they did. So you learn and you overcome. But I think if you're going forward in business, you have to have, you can call it determination, you can call it wherewithal, you can call it persistence. In fact, there's a gal who called it grit and wrote an entire book on how that was like the key component to a successful business was grit. The more the business has matured and the more failures I've encountered, my perspective on failures has changed. As I said earlier, it is a business inevitability. You're going to try something at some point, whether it's a marketing strategy that fails, a product that you think is awesome that nobody buys. There's various things, a decision you made within yourself or an external factor that came in and impacted your business. Failures will happen, and I think in the beginning they felt so earth-shattering to me. But now I've encountered a few and I've gotten through them, and it's developed this thing inside of me, this steely resolve, this irrevocable strength that I know I can overcome battles, and I know there'll be more battles in the future, and it makes me strong and it makes me certain. And if I could go and speak to my former self or someone who's earlier in the development of their business, that feeling of, oh, I made a huge mistake, or I'm in this huge jam, and you can get through it. Don't lay down and lick your wounds. Think, re-strategize, rebuild, pivot, overcome. It's going to happen, but it's those entrepreneurs that I've read about who address those failures with determination and renewed strength that go on to build big and amazing things. So if you are encountering a failure today, don't be discouraged. Everybody who started a business has. Let it shape you, make you better, stronger, and grow that strength and that ability to overcome.